When you're asked to test new software, where do you start? Well, the first step is to identify the sources of knowledge you need to test. What information, knowledge do you need? You need to know what is the purpose of the software. You need to know what situations it has to deal with. You need to know who are its target users and what is their perspective. You need to know how it behaves in any situation. Documents, the old system, the new system when available, and people, including yourself, are all sources. And now perhaps we should include AI as a source of knowledge too. All of these sources are fallible in one way or another. You need to challenge and test all your sources most, if not all, of the time. We're submerged in data already. How do we select our sources of knowledge and, more importantly, validate them? You might remember the new model for testing I showed you in a previous video. I introduced the concept of sources of knowledge then. A source of knowledge tells you something about your system under test or its context. Your sources will be documents, systems, people, including yourselves, and perhaps even AI. Now, all of these are fallible in one way or another. This all sounds a bit complicated. Do we really need to consider all these sources? Well, I think when you are asked to test a new system, you need to know what sources are available, what you get from them, which sources supersede or overrule others, and so on. What do you need in terms of information? We need to look at the organisational context. For example, what are the business goals the system must support? And at a more detailed level, which features of the system are most relevant to each goal? Which goals, and therefore features, are the most important, and which are less important? What are the requirements for the system? The features the system offers, and what these features should do. These are the functional requirements. We also need to know how the system should deliver that functionality. These are the non-functional requirements. I'm talking about performance, security and usability, and so on. The system has to cope and excel in many scenarios or situations of importance. In effect, we need to know what the system must do in order to be deemed a success. So we need an oracle or oracles for required behaviour. What that means is we need to know for every scenario how the system should behave. This is where we get the expected behaviours for our tests. The oracle usually won't provide specific behaviours, rather it might give us the rules to calculate what those behaviours are. What are the risks to success? What are the business risks external to the project that jeopardise the success of the system? We need to understand the technical risks of concern too. For example, interfaces to other systems inside and outside your organisation are always a concern. We need to understand the technical challenges involved in building this system. Where are the critical, complex and error-prone aspects of the software? Where do we get our data? Are there sources of data I can exploit? Can I use production data with appropriate measures taken to anonymise it? Are developers using synthetic data to test? So we need to build more realism into our test data. How much testing is enough? This is the biggest question of all, and we need an answer to share with stakeholders. Either our plans need to align with some reality, and we estimate tests on the basis of some model-based strategy, or given finite resources, we focus on what is achievable with the people available to us. Either way, we need an informed negotiation with stakeholders. What are the sources I'm talking about? It used to be the case in most projects that the requirements or specifications were all that we got. Everything you need to know is in the spec. It never was or is. Now that attitude has changed a lot. Some projects, for contractual or safety reasons, place high reliance on documentation. But most projects nowadays use collaborative tools to capture less formal requirements. User stories, for example, perhaps in the Gherkin format. And the social aspect of projects, face-to-face engagement, has greatly increased in importance. There's been a noticeable shift from formal documentation to more human interaction. This is a social change, not a technical one. The Agile Manifesto can take much credit for this change. The 4 values in the manifesto emphasise the reality. We value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So there's more talk and less formality. We value working software over comprehensive documentation. So there's less paper, but more collaboration. We value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. There's less arguing over documents and more communication. Responding to change over following a plan. Plans are not reality, even if some project managers think they are. Jerry Weinberg said many years ago, it's always a people problem. Documents can be very useful if they exist and are trusted, but more often you need to identify the people who have the information you need and make a strong case for getting access to them. The stakeholders and subject matter experts in your team will always be your best sources. Who is the other source of knowledge? It's you, stupid. You bring your own experience and skill to the party, of course, but you also bring your own biases and prejudices, so watch out. Now, of course, the old system can be a source of knowledge. If you're working on a replacement for an old system, some functionality will be migrated like for like. So the old system can be, for some functionality, an oracle for the new system. The problems in the old system might also suggest where problems in the new one could occur. And when it's available, the new system is a source of knowledge too. The new system or new functionality may not match perfectly the documentation or the expectation of the users or yourself. Obviously, you'll want to get access to this functionality as soon as possible to get some familiarity with it. And of course, when you are testing the system, it is the only source of actual behaviour. Is AI a source too? Given a brief, AI will happily generate reams of requirements, user stories, code, tests and test code. You might use ChatGPT or a similar large language model to do this yourself, or you could use a tool that is AI powered. Now, AI promises huge increases in productivity, but you need to be really careful. AI is incredible. It produces believable outputs, but it does make mistakes. AI at best is an idiot savant. It remembers everything, but ultimately can only tell you what you want to hear. It isn't self-critical usually. You can prompt it to be self-critical and critical of your work too, but ultimately you own the content it produces. You are responsible for it. You must review it carefully. At the end of the day, all your sources are fallible. Clearly, some of your colleagues are smarter or better informed than others. Managers may not be up to date with the information at the coalface, but subject matter experts may disagree. You may have to pick your way through the politics of people with different perspectives. Managers have to judge who is the more right in terms of alignment with business goals. Often your sources introduce contradictions or conflicts. Some sources supersede others, provide more or less detail, and have more or less credibility. You have to judge which version of the truth takes precedence, or defer to senior stakeholders for them to decide. So you must be alert to errors and be critical of your sources. With requirements, for instance, you can challenge the sources using examples. User stories and scenarios in a Gherkin format are excellent for this. By the same token, your critical thinking skills are your only defence when faced with crooked or lazy thinking, deceit, ambiguity, contradiction or bias. If you want to know more about the concepts I'm talking about in the Glossary of Terms videos, it will probably help you if you take a look at the Leadership in Tests online class that I created a year or two ago. It covers some of the topics in more detail and obviously provides more of a structured approach to explanations of the concepts, and also gives you some idea of how to do some of the things that I talk about. I hope you can take a look at it and get value out of it. The link is below, bit.ly/leadintest.